Through the ancient pines of the Oregon wilderness, the wind howls, carrying with it whispers of a tale long forgotten. A tale of a remote homestead where weary travelers sought refuge, only to vanish without a trace. I am your host, and tonight we journey back to the year 1809, to a dark chapter in the untamed Oregon Territory. Before the Oregon Trail, before statehood, when this land was still contested by nations and known only to native tribes and hardy fur trappers, a small clearing existed in the dense forest. Here stood the Blackwood Homestead, a sturdy log cabin with smoke curling from its stone chimney, promising warmth and shelter to those traversing the wilderness. The family who dwelt there, Isaiah Blackwood, his wife Eleanor, and their 3 children, appeared to be nothing more than humble pioneers carving out an existence on the frontier. But appearances, as we shall discover, can be most deceiving. In the spring of 1807, the Blackwoods arrived in the Oregon Territory, having journeyed from the eastern settlements with little more than a wagon of possessions and ambition burning in Isaiah's eyes. A tall man with broad shoulders and calloused hands, Isaiah had the look of someone who had wrestled the very earth for survival and emerged victorious. His wife Eleanor was slender with keen eyes that missed nothing, and a voice as sweet as spring honey when greeting strangers. Their children, Thomas, age 16, Sarah, 14, and young James, just 10, were raised in the harsh realities of frontier life. Each bore the quiet resolve of those who learn early that survival demands sacrifice. The family built their cabin in a small valley, a day's ride from the nearest trading post. Behind the dwelling, they planted an orchard of apple trees, unusual for settlers so newly arrived, but a point of peculiar pride for Isaiah. Apple trees need tending, he would tell passing travelers. But they give back tenfold in bounty, the secret's in the soil. At this, he would often share a knowing glance with Eleanor, a private joke between husband and wife that no outsider could decipher. Among the sparse population of the territory, the Blackwood Homestead quickly gained a reputation as a haven for travelers. In a land where shelter could mean the difference between life and death, their hospitality was remarked upon by fur trappers, explorers, and the occasional merchant braving the territory. A warm meal, a clean bed, and engaging conversation were offered freely, with Isaiah refusing payment beyond a modest contribution to their stores. "We're all God's children in the wilderness," he would proclaim, raising a tin cup of home-distilled whiskey and toast. "Today I shelter you. Tomorrow you may save another." What few knew was that Isaiah Blackwood had not always been a man of such apparent generosity. Back east in the settlements, he had been known by another name, and had fled not in search of opportunity, but to escape the consequences of his actions. A series of suspicious deaths, missing persons, and unexplained fires had followed in his wake, though never with enough evidence to bring formal charges. Eleanor, too, had her secrets. The daughter of a respected physician, she had developed an unsettling fascination with anatomy at an early age, a curiosity her father had discouraged to the point of sending her away to relatives, where she first encountered the charismatic Isaiah. Their courtship had been brief and intense, a meeting of minds that recognized in each other something most would shrink from. Together, they had formulated a plan to start anew in the untamed Western Territories, where law was distant and survival was paramount. The children, each molded from birth to assist in the family's true purpose, knew nothing of life beyond their parents' twisted vision. The year 1809 brought an unusual number of travelers through the region. News of potential treaties with native tribes and reports of abundant game and fertile land had sparked interest in the territory. With calculating eyes, the Blackwoods watched this increased traffic, selecting their targets with methodical precision. They preferred solitary travelers or small groups, a fur trapper with a season's worth of pelts, a land surveyor with instruments that could fetch a handsome price, a merchant carrying trade goods to the coast. The family had developed a system as efficient as it was horrifying. Isaiah would engage visitors in conversation, assessing their wealth, connections, and whether they would be missed. Eleanor would serve her special tea, brewed with herbs gathered from the forest, herbs that dulled the senses and clouded judgment. The children had their roles as well. Thomas, strong like his father, assisted with the disposal. Sarah maintained watch for unexpected visitors, and young James tended to the orchard, ensuring the soil remained rich and fertile. The process was always the same. After the tea took effect, leaving the victims confused and unable to resist, Isaiah would lead them to the barn under the pretense of showing them something of interest, perhaps a unique pelt or a curious artifact. There, in the lantern-lit shadows, he would dispatch them with a single blow from an iron mallet kept hanging on the wall among innocent farm implements. The bodies would be stripped of valuables, clothing, and anything that might identify them, then wrapped in burlap and carried to the orchard under cover of darkness. The orchard was Eleanor's domain. With knowledge gleaned from her father's medical books, she had discovered that human remains properly prepared and buried at the roots of fruit trees provided nourishment that resulted in the most extraordinary harvest. Throughout the region, the Blackwood apples became known for their size and sweetness. A delicacy that Eleanor would preserve and gift to influential visitors, territorial officials, military officers, and traders who might otherwise ask too many questions about missing persons. The secrets in the soil, Isaiah would repeat with a wink, never revealing just how literal his statement was. One crisp autumn evening in 1809, as golden leaves swirled around the homestead and the first hint of winter chilled the air, a group of 3 men approached the Blackwood cabin. From the porch, Isaiah watched, pipe in hand, assessing them with practiced eyes. 2 were clearly trappers, their garments fashioned from animal hides, rifles slung across their backs. The third was different, a slender man in a worn but well-cut coat, with spectacles perched upon his nose and a leather satchel clutched to his chest. A man of learning perhaps, or a government man. Either way, a complication. "Hail the house," called one of the trappers, a burly man with a beard reaching halfway down his chest. "We seek shelter for the night. Can you accommodate weary travelers?" Isaiah tamped down his pipe and smiled warmly. The Blackwood home turns no one away. "Come, stable your horses and join us for supper. Eleanor has venison stew simmering that would make a king weep with joy." The men introduced themselves as Jeremiah and Caleb, veteran trappers who had spent the summer in the mountains, and Dr. William Thorne, a naturalist documenting the flora and fauna of the Oregon Territory for a scientific society back east. The doctor's presence immediately put Isaiah on alert. A man recording his observations would be more likely to be missed. His disappearance investigated as the men settled around the rough-hewn table in the cabin's main room. Eleanor served bowls of steaming stew and fresh bread, her movements graceful and practiced. The children sat quietly, observing the strangers with expressionless eyes that belied their youth. The conversation flowed as easily as the whiskey Isaiah poured, with the trappers recounting tales of their adventures and close encounters with bears and hostile warriors. Dr. Thorne spoke of his work, eyes alight with passion, as he described species of plants never before documented. "The diversity of life here is astounding," he proclaimed, adjusting his spectacles. "I've filled 3 journals already, and I've only begun to scratch the surface of this territory's wonders." "You must show us your drawings," Eleanor suggested, her voice honey as she refilled his cup with her special tea. "I've always been fascinated by the healing properties of plants." The doctor eagerly retrieved his satchel, producing several leather-bound journals filled with meticulous sketches and notes. Eleanor leaned close, her interest appearing genuine as she asked questions about various specimens. Isaiah recognized her technique, building trust, creating a sense of connection that would make the victim all the more vulnerable when the time came. As the evening progressed, the effects of Eleanor's tea began to manifest. The trappers grew sluggish, their speech slurring, eyelids growing heavy. Dr. Thorne, who had consumed less in his excitement to share his work, remained more alert, though his movements had slowed noticeably. "Perhaps it's time to show our guests to their sleeping quarters," Isaiah suggested, exchanging a meaningful glance with Thomas. "It's been a long day, and the body needs rest." The family had developed a system for handling multiple guests. They would be separated, one in the spare room, one in the barn loft, one in a lianto adjacent to the main cabin, preventing any opportunity for them to communicate their growing suspicions as the drugged tea wore off. The trappers, barely conscious, were easily guided to their assigned locations. Dr. Thorne, however, proved more problematic. "I must secure my journals," he insisted, clutching his satchel with surprising strength despite his impaired state. "The work of months irreplaceable." "Of course, Doctor," Isaiah assured him, his smile never reaching his cold eyes. Your belongings will be safe under this roof. You have my word as a Christian man." Something in Isaiah's tone must have penetrated the fog, clouding the doctor's mind. A flicker of alarm crossed his features, quickly suppressed, but not before Elena noticed. She placed a gentle hand on the doctor's arm, guiding him toward the spare room. "Rest now," she murmured soothingly. "Morning comes early in the wilderness." As the door closed behind the doctor, Isaiah turned to his eldest son. "He suspects. Keep watch tonight. If he attempts to leave or reach the others, you know what to do." Thomas nodded solemnly, retrieving a hunting knife from a drawer and settling into a chair with a clear view of the spare room door. Sarah was dispatched to monitor the barn where one of the trappers lay unconscious. While young James was sent to bed, his services not required until the morning's grim work in the orchard, Elena and Isaiah conferred in hushed tones by the dying fire, weighing the risks and rewards of their current situation. 3 men meant 3 valuable sets of possessions, but also 3 bodies to dispose of before dawn. The doctor's journals presented both opportunity and danger. They could be sold to the right buyer, but they also created a record of his presence in the territory that could lead investigators to their doorstep. The scientific society will expect his findings, Eleanor reasoned, her practical mind already calculating contingencies. When he fails to return, they will retrace his journey. Isaiah paced the worn floorboards, considering their options. "We could claim they departed after breakfast, headed west toward the coast. By the time anyone comes looking, the trail will be cold." Eleanor shook her head, unconvinced. "The doctor is different from our usual visitors. His absence will be noted. Investigated. Perhaps we should let him continue his journey, focus only on the trappers." This suggestion brought a scowl to Isaiah's face and risked him remembering something unusual about our hospitality, about the tea that made him feel strange. "No, once they cross our threshold, there can be no witnesses." Their deliberation was interrupted by a soft thud from the spare room, followed by the scrape of the window being raised. Thomas was on his feet instantly, knife in hand, but Isaiah gestured for him to wait. Silently, father and son positioned themselves on either side of the door, listening as the floorboards creaked under the doctor's cautious steps. When the door inched open, Dr. Thorne found himself face to face with Isaiah's imposing figure. All pretense of hospitality gone from his expression. "Going somewhere, Doctor?" Isaiah asked softly, his voice like the whisper of a blade being drawn from its sheath. The doctor, still unsteady, but with fear bringing clarity to his mind, clutched his satchel to his chest like a shield. "I remembered an urgent matter. Must continue my journey. Didn't wish to disturb your family's rest." At night, through wilderness known to have wolf packs and hostile natives, Isaiah clicked his tongue in disapproval. That would be most unwise, almost as unwise as attempting to flee from the safety of this cabin. Dr. Thorne's eyes darted between Isaiah and Thomas, noting the knife gleaming in the young man's hand. Understanding dawned on his face, the realization that he had stumbled into a trap from which others had not escaped. "The tea," he murmured, backing away until he felt the edge of a table against his spine. "You drugged us." "A special blend," Eleanor confirmed, emerging from the shadows like a spectre. "Quite effective on most visitors. You appear to have unusual resistance, Doctor. A matter of body weight, perhaps, or a natural tolerance. Fascinating from a medical perspective, wouldn't you agree?" The doctor's hand crept toward his coat pocket, a movement not lost on Isaiah's vigilant gaze. Looking for this, Isaiah produced a small flintlock pistol, which he must have removed from the doctor's possessions earlier. A sensible precaution for a man traveling in dangerous territory, though it wouldn't have saved you from what comes next. Dr. Thorne, recognizing the futility of his situation, straightened his spine and faced his captors with unexpected dignity. "You've done this before, the missing travelers. It's been you all along." "The wilderness claims many who are unprepared for its hardships," Isaiah replied with a shrug. "We merely expedite the inevitable for some and profit from their misfortune," the doctor added. His analytical mind piecing together the horrific puzzle even in the face of his own mortality, the possessions, the valuables. You're no different from roadside bandits." This comparison visibly angered Isaiah, his jaw tightening beneath his beard. "We are nothing like common thieves. We are pioneers, survivors. We take what we need to thrive in this harsh land and waste nothing." "Nothing is wasted," Eleanor echoed, her serene smile chilling in the context of their conversation. "Every visitor contributes to the prosperity of our homestead. Some through their possessions, others through their more organic contributions." A terrible understanding dawned on Dr. Thorne's face as he recalled earlier conversations. "The orchard, the soil you've been. The Blackwood apples are renowned throughout the territory," Eleanor stated proudly. "So sweet, so unique in flavor. Nature's alchemy at work, transforming death into life." The doctor swayed slightly, whether from the lingering effects of the drugged tea or from horror at his discovery. It was impossible to tell. "You're monsters," he whispered, clutching his precious journals tighter. "Demons in human form." "Judgment is for the Almighty alone," Isaiah countered, stepping closer, his massive frame blocking any path to escape. "And you'll be meeting him shortly, Doctor. But first, I'm curious about something." He gestured to the satchel. "Your work. You've been documenting species never before catalogued, you said. Knowledge that would otherwise be lost if you disappear in the wilderness." Dr. Thorne glanced down at his journals, understanding flickering in his eyes. "My life for my work? Is that the bargain you're offering?" Isaiah smiled. A predator's smile with no warmth. "I'm a practical man, Doctor. Those journals represent value to the right buyer, to the advancement of knowledge. I propose a trade. Your final hours spent transferring your discoveries to fresh pages, removing any reference to dates or locations that might indicate how far you traveled into the territory. In exchange, your death will be quick, painless, a mercy not granted to all who sleep beneath our apple trees." The doctor's shoulders slumped in defeat, but his mind raced, seeking any opportunity for survival or failing that. A way to leave evidence of the Blackwood's crimes for future travelers to discover. "And if I refuse?" he asked, already suspecting the answer. Eleanor stepped forward, her delicate hand caressing the knife her son held. "Then we have other methods learned through considerable practice. Ways to extend the human capacity for suffering while extracting the information we desire. My father was a physician, you see. I observed many of his procedures before my interests led him to send me away." The implication hung in the air like the scent of decay, unspoken but unmistakable. Dr. Thorne closed his eyes briefly, calculating his non-existent options. "I will need light, ink, and fresh paper." He finally conceded, his voice hollow with despair. "A wise choice," Isaiah approved, gesturing toward the table. "You'll work here where we can observe. Thomas, secure our other guests more thoroughly. They should sleep until morning, but take no chances. Sarah," he called, and his daughter appeared silently in the doorway. "Bring the doctor what he requires for his work." As the family bustled about their assigned tasks with practiced efficiency, Dr. Thorne settled at the table, opening his journals with trembling hands. The magnitude of his situation pressed upon him like a physical weight, recording his life's work while his executioners watched, knowing that each page completed brought him closer to his final breath. Yet within this despair, a seed of defiance took root as he began transcribing his meticulous notes and drawings. The doctor's mind worked on a parallel task. How to embed a warning within these pages, a hidden message that might alert a knowledgeable reader to the fate that had befallen him and countless others at the hands of the Blackwood family. The night deepened around the isolated cabin, wind moaning through the pines like the ghosts of those already claimed by the blood-stained soil of the orchard. Inside, by the light of oil lamps, Dr. Thorne's quill scratched steadily across page after page, each illustrating wonders of the natural world he had devoted his life to studying, each potentially containing the cipher that might one day bring justice to this dark corner of the Oregon Territory. Dawn approached with agonizing slowness, the eastern sky barely beginning to lighten when Dr. Thorne completed his task. His hand was cramped, his eyes burning from hours of detailed work by insufficient light, but satisfaction mingled with his fear. He had done what he could, embedded subtle abnormalities in certain plant illustrations, used specific Latin nomenclature that, when the first letters were combined, spelled out a warning and the name Blackwood. Whether anyone would ever decipher these clues remained to be seen, but the effort had kept him from succumbing to paralyzing terror throughout the night. "Finished," he announced, setting down his quill and flexing his stiffened fingers. Every species, every observation transferred as agreed. Isaiah, who had dozed in a chair, while Elena maintained vigilant watch, stirred and approached the table. He leaped through the pages with surprising gentleness, admiring the detailed illustrations of plants, insects, and geological formations. "Remarkable work, Doctor," he commented, genuine appreciation in his voice. "Such precision, such attention to detail. A shame your society will never receive these documents." Dr. Thorne's head snapped up, confusion and anger flashing across his features. "We had an agreement. My work for a merciful end. And you shall have it," Isaiah assured him. "But these journals are far too valuable to sell or trade. The knowledge contained within them. Eleanor has particular interest in the medicinal properties of native plants. Your observations will serve the Blackwood family for generations to come." The betrayal, though perhaps predictable from a man who murdered without remorse, still stung. Dr. Thorne slumped in his chair, the last flicker of hope extinguished. His hidden messages would remain here, unseen by those who might understand them, while his body nourished the grotesque harvest of the Blackwood orchard. Eleanor approached, resting a hand on the doctor's shoulder with disconcerting gentleness. "It's time, William," she said, using his given name as if they were old friends. "The others will be waking soon. We must conclude our business before the day's work begins." Dr. Thorne stood on unsteady legs, dignity reasserting itself in his final moments. "You won't escape judgment forever," he stated quietly. "Men like me have colleagues, associates who will come looking. One day, someone will discover what happens here." Isaiah chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. "The wilderness claims many lives, Doctor. You'll be but one more unfortunate soul lost to its dangers. Now, shall we proceed to the barn? Or would you prefer to make this difficult for yourself? With no viable alternative, Dr. Thorne allowed himself to be led outside, the cool pre-dawn air filling his lungs with what he knew would be among his final breaths. The eastern sky had turned a pale lavender, stars still visible in the western expanse. The beauty of the moment struck him with painful poignancy. A naturalist to the end, observing the wonders of creation, even on his way to slaughter. The barn loomed before them, its weathered timbers silver in the dim light. Isaiah unlatched the heavy door, the creak of hinges unnaturally loud in the stillness. Inside, lantern light revealed one of the trappers. Jeremiah, the burly one with the expansive beard, bound hand and foot in the center of the open space. His eyes were wide with terror above the gag that prevented him from crying out, his body straining futilely against his restraints. "Your companion awakened earlier than expected," Isaiah explained conversationally, as if discussing a minor inconvenience rather than a captive destined for murder. "He proved somewhat uncooperative. Thomas was forced to restrain him while we concluded our business with you." Dr. Thorne met Jeremiah's desperate gaze, seeing in it the same horrible understanding that had dawned on him hours earlier. "I'm sorry," he whispered, knowing the words were wholly inadequate, but compelled to offer some human connection in their final moments. "Touching," Eleanor remarked dryly, closing the barn door behind them, "but unnecessary. He cannot hear you over his own thoughts of mortality." Thomas emerged from the shadows, the iron mallet in his hand. His young face was eerily expressionless, as if he were about to perform a routine chore rather than take a human life. Sarah appeared as well, positioning herself by the door, watchful as always. "Where is the other one?" Dr. Thorne asked, noticing the absence of Caleb, the third member of their party. "Already contributing to the prosperity of our orchard," Isaiah replied with a casual wave of his hand. He never fully awakened from Eleanor's tea. "A blessing for him, I suppose." The cavalier reference to their friend's murder sparked something in Jeremiah. With a surge of desperate strength, he thrashed against his bonds, toppling sideways onto the straw-covered floor. His muffled cries vibrated with rage and terror. "Restrain him properly, Thomas," Isaiah commanded sharply. "We do this with precision, not chaos." As Thomas moved to comply, Dr. Thorne made his decision. If death was inevitable, he would not go meekly to slaughter like a sacrificial lamb. With a sudden lunge born of desperation rather than any coherent plan, he charged toward Isaiah, hoping to catch the larger man off guard. For a moment, it seemed to work. The doctor's shoulder connected with Isaiah's midsection, driving the air from his lungs and staggering him backward. Elelena cried out in alarm, and Sarah moved from her post by the door, confusion disrupting the family's usual methodical process. The advantage was momentary. Isaiah, though surprised, was a man hardened by frontier life and experienced in violence. He recovered quickly, seizing the doctor by the throat with one massive hand and lifting him until his feet barely touched the ground. "A disappointing choice, Doctor," Isaiah growled, his earlier civility evaporating. "I offered you dignity. Now you'll have neither that nor mercy." Dr. Thorne clawed at the hand, crushing his windpipe, spots dancing before his eyes as oxygen deprivation set in. Through tunneling vision, he saw Thomas approach with the mallet raised, eager to deliver the killing blow, as he had done countless times before. What happened next occurred so rapidly that later, when the survivors attempted to reconstruct the sequence of events, their accounts would differ in significant details. The barn door burst open with such force that it tore partially from its hinges. Framed in the doorway stood a figure none of them had anticipated. Caleb the trapper, presumed already dead and buried. Blood matted his hair and stained his buckskin shirt, but the flintlock rifle in his hands was steady, aimed directly at Isaiah's broad chest. "Release him," Caleb commanded, his voice raspy but determined. Now, Isaiah, momentarily frozen in shock, maintained his grip on the doctor's throat. "Impossible," he breathed. "You are unconscious. Eleanor's tea never fails." "I've built a tolerance to most poisons," Caleb replied grimly. "Hazard of living with the Chassonnier for 3 winters. They taught me to recognize the taste of dream root and how to resist its effects. I feigned sleep, waited for my opportunity. Now, for the last time, release him." Isaiah's expression darkened, calculation replacing surprise. With the doctor still dangling from his grasp, he had a human shield against any shot Caleb might attempt. "Lower your weapon," he countered. "Or I'll crush his throat before your finger can pull that trigger." The standoff stretched for several heartbeats, neither man willing to concede. Then, with serpentine swiftness, Eleanor retrieved a knife from her apron pocket and pressed it against Jeremiah's exposed throat. "Your friend's life for ours," she proposed coldly. "Even if you shoot my husband, Sarah, and Thomas will ensure neither of your companions leaves this barn alive. Lower your rifle and perhaps we can negotiate terms that benefit us all." Caleb's eyes narrowed, assessing the situation with the calculation of a man accustomed to wilderness survival. "There can be no terms with demons who murder travelers and bury them in their orchard," he stated flatly. This declaration sent a visible shock through the Blackwood family. Isaiah's grip on Dr. Thorne loosened fractionally, enough for the doctor to drag a partial breath into his starved lungs. "How could you possibly know about the orchard?" Elelena demanded, her composure cracking for the first time. A grim smile touched Caleb's weather-beaten face. "I wasn't completely unconscious last night. I heard more than you realized. And when I slipped away to retrieve our hidden weapons, I noticed freshly turned earth beneath your apple trees. The pieces weren't difficult to assemble." Isaiah's face contorted with rage, his massive frame tensing like a bear preparing to charge. "Then you know too much to leave here alive perhaps." Caleb acknowledged. "But I won't die easily, and I won't die alone." What followed was a blur of violence that would haunt the survivors' nightmares for years to come. Isaiah flung Dr. Thorne aside like a discarded doll and lunged toward Caleb. The rifle discharged with a deafening roar in the confined space of the barn, the bullet finding its mark in Isaiah's shoulder rather than his heart. The big man staggered but didn't fall, his momentum carrying him forward into Caleb. both men crashing to the ground in a tangle of limbs and curses. Thomas, seeing his father wounded, abandoned his position near Jeremiah and rushed forward with the mallet raised high. Dr. Thorne, dazed but conscious, managed to hook his foot around the boy's ankle as he passed, sending him sprawling face first onto the hard-packed earth. Eleanor, ever practical even in crisis, kept her knife pressed to Jeremiah's throat, using him as leverage in the chaotic situation. Enough, she shrieked above the sounds of struggle. "Cease this madness, or I open his veins this instant." Her command fell on deaf ears as the men continued their desperate battle. Caleb and Isaiah rolled across the barn floor, each seeking advantage. Isaiah's superior size countered by the bullet wound sapping his strength. Thomas regained his feet, abandoning the fallen mallet in favor of a pitchfork leaning against the wall, its tines gleaming dully in the lantern light. Sarah, who had remained frozen in shock when Caleb appeared, suddenly sprang into action. Instead of joining the fray, however, she darted through the open barn door, disappearing into the pre-dawn gloom. Whether she fled out of fear or with some strategic purpose, none of the combatants had the luxury of considering. Dr. Thorne, recognizing that the outcome of this desperate struggle remained uncertain, crawled toward Jeremiah. If he could free the trapper, they might yet tip the balance in their favor. Eleanor, distracted by the violent tableau of her husband battling Caleb, failed to notice the doctor's approach until he was nearly upon them. With a snarl of rage, she slashed with her knife, opening a long gash across the doctor's forearm. He cried out, but didn't retreat, lunging forward to grapple with the woman who had so calmly planned his execution hours earlier. They toppled sideways, the knife between them like a sliver of deadly lightning, each fighting for control of the blade. Across the barn, Isaiah had managed to pin Caleb beneath his superior weight. Massive hands closing around the trapper's throat in mirror image of how he had held Dr. Thorne earlier. Caleb thrashed and bucked, his face purpling as oxygen deprivation set in. Thomas approached with the pitchfork, prepared to end the trapper's resistance permanently. The moment balanced on a knife's edge, fate undecided, when the sound of galloping hooves penetrated the barn's wooden walls. Shouts followed, then the distinctive report of multiple rifles firing in quick succession. All struggle within the barn momentarily ceased as the combatants registered this unexpected development. The patrol, Caleb gasped through his constricted airway, a bloody smile spreading across his face. Right on schedule, Isaiah's expression transformed from rage to dawning horror. "What patrol?" he demanded, fingers tightening convulsively. Before Caleb could respond, assuming he even had the capacity to do so under Isaiah's crushing grip, the barn door crashed open once more. Silhouetted against the brightening dawn stood four men in the distinctive uniforms of the Northwest Company. Private fur traders who maintained a semblance of law in these disputed territories when official authorities were weeks of travel away. Their rifles were leveled, faces grim as they surveyed the scene before them. The bound Jeremiah, Dr. Thorne, and Eleanor locked in struggle over a blooded knife. Isaiah straddling the nearly unconscious Caleb and Thomas frozen in place with a pitchfork poised to strike. "Lower your weapons," commanded the leader. A grizzled veteran with a scar bisecting his left cheek. "Or by God, we'll fire where you stand." Thomas, young and frightened, despite his participation in his family's gruesome activities, immediately dropped the pitchfork. Eleanor, recognizing the futility of resistance against armed men, released her grip on the knife, allowing Dr. Thorne to secure it and scramble away from her. Only Isaiah remained defiant, maintaining his stranglehold on Caleb despite the rifles aimed at his back. "Isaiah Blackwood," the doctor wheezed, clutching his bleeding arm. "Release him now or join your victims beneath the apple trees." The mention of the orchard caused the patrol leader's eyes to narrow. "What's this about apple trees?" he demanded. Dr. Thorne, gathering his remaining strength, pointed through the open barn door toward the orderly rows of trees visible in the growing light. "Their secret," he explained hoarsely. "Bodies buried beneath the orchard, travelers who sought shelter, only to be murdered for their possessions." The patrol exchanged glances of disgusted disbelief, but the leader nodded to one of his men. "Jenkins, take Stevens and investigate this claim. If there's recently disturbed earth, as the gentleman suggests, the implications hung in the air, unspoken, but understood by all present. 2 of the men departed, leaving their companions covering the Blackwoods with unwavering rifles. "This is absurd," Eleanor protested, summoning the affronted dignity of a frontier wife unjustly accused. "We're God-fearing settlers who offer hospitality to travelers. These men attempted to rob us, threatened our children. My husband defended our home as any man would." The patrol leader's expression remained skeptical. "We'll determine the truth soon enough. Until then, all of you will remain exactly where you are." Isaiah, recognizing that his situation grew more untenable by the moment, finally released his grip on Caleb, who rolled away, gasping desperately for air. The massive settler rose slowly to his feet, hands raised in apparent surrender. "A misunderstanding," he rumbled, his voice carrying the practiced sincerity that had disarmed so many previous victims. "As my wife says, we defended ourselves against those who would do us harm. Whatever you find in our orchard, it wasn't placed there by our hands." The doctor, helping Jeremiah as another patrol member cut his bonds, laughed bitterly. "Their own son tends the orchard. The daughter keeps watch. The entire family participates in this. This abattoir, disguised as hospitality." Mentions of the children caused the patrol leader to glance around the barn with sudden concern. "Where is the daughter you mentioned and the youngest son?" His question was answered by shouts from outside, followed by the thunder of a single shot. The remaining patrolman tensed, rifles tracking toward the door, uncertain what new threat approached. Jenkins reappeared, his face ashen. "Sir, you'd better come see this and bring restraints for these devils. What the doctor claims, it's true, more than true." Before the patrol leader could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Sarah Blackwood was being marched toward the barn at rifle point by Stevens, her attempts to flee having been thwarted. Behind them walked young James, his expression curiously blank, a child who had known nothing but the twisted morality of his parents' creation, found her trying to burn the house down. Stevens reported grimly. "With her little brother inside, said if they couldn't have the homestead, no one would." Eleanor's composure finally shattered, a wail of anguish tearing from her throat as she lunged toward her children, only to be restrained by the nearest patrolman. Isaiah remained unnaturally still, his eyes calculating even now, seeking any opportunity for escape. "The orchard," Jenkins continued, unable to keep the horror from his voice. "We found multiple graves, some fresh, some older, and a ledger in the house listing names, possessions. It's been going on for years." The patrol leader's expression hardened as the full scope of the Blackwoods crimes became apparent. "Secure them all," he ordered. "We'll transport them to Fort Atoria for trial." "Trial?" Dr. Thorne protested, his physician's training temporarily overridden by the trauma he had endured. "What these monsters deserve is to hang from their own apple trees. Justice will be served through proper channels," the leader responded firmly. "Frontier justice is still justice, Doctor. They'll answer for their crimes before witnesses and evidence, not through summary execution." As the Blackwoods were bound with the same ropes they had used on their victims, a terrible quiet descended upon the scene. The rising sun illuminated the orchard, its neat rows of trees, now revealed as monuments to unthinkable evil rather than agricultural achievement. In the golden morning light, the apples hanging heavy from the branches seemed to glow with unnatural vitality, nourished by the unspeakable fertilizer beneath their roots. Dr. Thorne, leaning heavily on Caleb for support, surveyed the homestead that had nearly become his final resting place. "What happens to this land now?" he asked quietly. "It seems wrong to simply abandon it, yet who would want property watered with the blood of innocents?" The patrol leader removed his hat, running a hand through graying hair as he considered the question. "The company will report this to territorial authorities. In time, perhaps it will be reclaimed, the orchard burned, the soil sanctified. For now, it stands as a warning to all who might consider preying upon travelers in these wild lands." As the Blackwoods were loaded into a wagon for the journey to justice, Isaiah finally spoke, his voice carrying across the homestead with chilling clarity. "The wilderness provides for those strong enough to take what they need," he proclaimed, eyes burning with fanatical certainty, despite his circumstances. We merely claimed what was ours by right of courage and cunning. Silence that devil, ordered the patrol leader, and a cloth was tied around Isaiah's mouth, muffling his disturbing philosophy. Dr. Thorne watched as the wagon departed, carrying away the family that had terrorized this corner of the Oregon Territory for years. He clutched his precious journals, the hidden warnings within them no longer necessary, but perhaps still valuable as testament to what had occurred here. "Will you continue your expedition, Doctor?" Caleb asked, his throat bruised, but his spirit unbroken by their ordeal. The naturalist considered the question, gazing at the wilderness stretching before them. Beautiful, dangerous, and still largely unmapped. Despite everything, his scientific curiosity remained undiamond. Yes, he decided finally. There's too much knowledge waiting to be discovered. Too many wonders to document, but perhaps with a larger party next time, and with companions who sleep lightly and know the taste of dream root. Caleb smiled grimly, adjusting the rifle slung across his back. "Wise precautions in this territory, Doctor. The wilderness claims many who are unprepared for its dangers, both natural and man-made." As they prepared to depart, Dr. Thorne cast one final glance at the Blackwood orchard. Its fruit ripening in the morning sun, branches swaying gently in the breeze as if beckoning to weary travelers. In the years to come, tales would spread of the family who offered hospitality with one hand while concealing a knife in the other, and of the gruesome secret that nourished their famous apple trees. The Blackwood orchard became a dark legend in the territory, a cautionary tale told around campfires to remind those venturing into the wilderness that not all dangers wore the face of nature or hostile warriors. Sometimes the most lethal predators offered a warm hearth and a comfortable bed, waiting until your eyes closed before revealing their true nature. And if travelers passing through the region claimed to hear whispers on the wind when camping near the abandoned homestead, voices pleading for help or warning of danger, most attributed it to imagination heightened by knowledge of what had occurred there. Few were willing to investigate such phenomena, preferring to make camp elsewhere, away from soil that had absorbed so much suffering. In time, nature reclaimed the clearing. The cabin collapsed, the barn rotted away, and forest encroached upon the infamous orchard. Yet the apple trees continued to bear fruit of exceptional size and sweetness long after human hands ceased tending them. A final macabre legacy of the family that had hunted travelers and buried them beneath gnarled roots, transforming death into a harvest that locals refused to touch, no matter how tempting it appeared. Through the ancient pines of the Oregon wilderness, the wind still howls, carrying whispers of a tale nearly forgotten. A tale of a remote homestead where weary travelers sought refuge, only to vanish without a trace. The Blackwood family may be long gone, but in the deep woods of Oregon Territory, their legacy remains. A dark chapter in the history of the frontier, a warning to those who might mistake hospitality for safety in the untamed reaches of the wilderness. This has been the Dead Rite. Until next time, remember, not all monsters lurk in the shadows. Some stand in broad daylight, offering shelter from the storm with a smile on their lips and murder in their hearts.